So this is some what people like to call low effort React Andy content. Okay, that's what we're doing right now. I think it is not baseless because the tipping thing, it's a relevant topic. I have talked about it in the past, but the past was like months ago, maybe like a year ago. And things have gotten a little bit out of hand in some cases. Um, like, I don't know, a few instances. I don't know, I've ordered from a machine at McDonald's and it offered me a chance to tip. Who gets that money, right? Does it go to the machine, right? Like I mentioned the other day, I went to a place that has like a good number of franchises. They're not like huge, but they probably have like 100 stores in Canada, right? Like not small. And when I was punching in the machine, it was like 10, 15, 20 or other. It didn't give me a chance to, there's like usually there's a no tip button. It didn't have that button. You basically had to go to other and then enter 0 and then confirm. You literally had to tip them. You tip them 0, I guess, if you really must, right? And this is again when I'm picking up an order from a fast food place. To be clear, I did tip them anyway. I go to like a pretty small number of fast food places to get like food on the regular. I'm happy to support local businesses. I can afford it. If I tip them like 10, 15% and they make a little bit more money and it makes their day better, I'm totally fine with that. So I'm probably part of the problem, to be honest with you guys. Probably part of the problem, but you know, I'm okay with that. At the same time, I can understand how some of the whole tipping thing is pretty BS. I'll mention another really bad like tipping thing. This is actually in Vegas. We stay at a hotel and the doorman's like, "Let me get your luggage." And I'm like, "It's just a backpack and like a carry-on with wheels on it." I'm like, "No, it's fine, thank you." Dude grabs the shit anyway, and he basically starts hauling it. So we're like, "Okay, we'll just follow him." And then we go to our room, and he's like waiting in front of the door expecting for a tip. Like, bro, what the hell is that? Right? Yeah. So there's definitely some scumbaggery happening. All right. This is not a one-sided issue. Okay. So I just kind of want to offer that as context. All right. So this is Asmongold. Uh, he like uh, I think he still maybe plays, but mostly he played like World of Warcraft, and I like him. He's nice, and his opinions are interesting, even if they're not always correct. But you know what? No one has opinions that are correct all the time. But I very much like him. I'm subscribed to Asmongold, and he's watching a video. I believe it's by Cold Fusion. He'll probably mention. Actually, it'll probably be in his description here. Oh, it's biologically answered. Oh, dude, I thought it was Cold Fusion. Okay, anyway. I actually don't know who that is. I might have to check them out. Okay, and I watched like the first 9 minutes of this video. So I kind of know what to expect in the first little while. Okay, let's watch.
50%, 75% tip. That's a lot.
Tipping has become a burden. 25, 50, 75% tips for a takeout order or Starbucks coffee.
I have never tipped. Okay, no, that's not true. I probably have tipped like 70. So sometimes they get my order wrong, but they're really nice about it and they're really fast, and then they compensate it on the bill. So when that happens and they get the order wrong and compensate it, and otherwise very satisfied with everything, I will tip the cost that they compensated. So I probably have tipped like 70% like a couple times. But in that case, in terms of like just here's some free money tipping, okay, like once we knew the person, we tipped like 50. I don't think I've ever tipped more than like 30, but we tip like 30 pretty frequently. Yeah, we tip about 30 pretty frequently. Okay. But yeah, again, we can afford it and we like to support local businesses if we can.
Coffee. And don't even get me started on food delivery apps. If you're ordering something small, be prepared to leave a tip.
I do think food delivery apps should be much more transparent with how much you're paying before you actually place your order.
I don't use
because
food
I think
delivery
there's
apps.
just so many hidden costs and extra fees.
I don't have a problem
It's
with
like
them.
you can
I just
place
don't
an
want
order
another
for
person
$24 and it's $46.
touching my food post-COVID.
It's nuts.
That's worth
And I've just
more
gotten
than
used to
your
getting our own
order
food.
itself. And it's not just restaurants where you'll be tipping either. Nowadays, tipping is commonplace at barbershops, car washes, Ubers, plumbers, and basically any other service.
I don't think this is true.
Bro, you have to tip your plumber? How about we just pay them like $80 an hour or whatever? Like that's what we do. If you guys tipped I didn't know this was a thing. I'm sorry. Usually when we get a plumber, they like invoice us like an Interac bill. You just pay it. I missed that the first time I watched this bit. I've never heard of tipping a plumber. I'm sorry. It's not. Your plumber charges $2.50 an hour? Holy crap, dude. You should probably like this guy must be amazing. $2.50? Dude, J-Mac, that's on the high side, bro.
My understanding is that tipping at a barbershop has always
Bay
been the
Area,
norm. Tipping
Jesus.
anybody that's doing any sort of trade skill has never been the norm. Yeah, like I remember
Okay,
like my dad would tip our barber like whenever he and I would go and get our haircut like 20 years ago. Yeah, I mean I don't know if people are ever tipping like
Okay. I have to correct what I said. I have tipped my barber over 30%. Just because they don't charge like anything. Like even before I had like streamer money. So I worked as a computer technician in like it's not like Chinatown. Chinatown's like downtown. It's like uptown Chinatown. So like the barber that I liked, he was Chinese, he barely spoke English. And the dude charged like $8 for a haircut. Yeah, I just give him like a 20. You know, he's like he's the best barber I knew, you know? Like what am I supposed to do? Give him $9? I mean, come on, right? No, this is before I was a streamer. I worked for like barely minimum wage, a little bit over.
like for example, we have a guy he's like a kind of like a family
What hair? This is me in high school, guys. Okay. This is grade 12, I think. I had hair.
family friend, and he does a lot of like electrician work for us and other stuff like that. And like he always doesn't ask for that much money, and I always end up giving him more money. He's like, oh, you know, give me like 180, I'll give him 200, right? But like that's because I know I'm getting a bro deal because he's saying that in the first place.
This is basically
So,
like
like,
the
it's a
$8
totally
barber
different dynamic.
situation.
That you can think of, which doesn't really make sense. At least with restaurants, the service is not the main thing you're paying for.
Yeah.
You're paying
Paying
for
the
the
food,
food.
yeah.
So it kind of makes sense to appreciate great service that came along with it. But in the case of a
So, yeah, when you go to a restaurant, you pay for the food. Okay, not really, because like if you're going to a restaurant and you're sitting there, you're paying for your seat and your experience and all that stuff. But that is kind of a point, but the other point is that in America, and Asmongold's American, I don't know if the guy he's watching is American, but he's probably relating to an American perspective on the topic. waiters in America, minimum wage for waiters is $2 an hour. And my understanding is that in most states where this is still, because states can have a higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage. So in most states where it's still $2 an hour, I believe the restaurant has to pay the difference if they don't hit minimum wage. But minimum wage in places where the waiter wage is $2 an hour, minimum wage is still like $7 an hour. So basically, if you're a waiter in one of these places, it's not like you need some tips so you can get like $7 an hour. You need, like, in some cases, quite a few tips to like survive, because you can't really survive off $7 an hour. Okay, so that's the other side of this. So if you go and eat at a restaurant where the waiter minimum wage is $2 an hour, and you're like, giving unnecessary crap for not tipping and all that, I don't know. That I think you gotta be a little decent. You gotta, yeah.
A car wash or a haircut, you're paying for the service itself. So it's kind of odd that you have to pay 15 or 25% more. And inflation has only made this worse.
Yep.
Now, I'm not trying to suggest that these people shouldn't be paid a fair wage, but rather that it should be reflected in the upfront price. This would not.
I'm glad to see more people calling out tipping and how corrosive it is. I personally don't think that the customer, like, I think there should be, and this is what I said about the first video, and I know there are people that disliked what I said, but I really believe this. I find it to be ridiculous that people think that we should solve this with, like, legislation. Why can't you just not give them the money? Because the person has the option to not tip. So why is it that so the government has to mandate because you don't have self-control because you're too afraid of looking bad?
So this is kind of where I'm gonna have to disagree with Asmongold here a little bit. The tipping problem is a problem because the federal minimum wage for waiters is $2 an hour. So it's not like the government has to police people's feelings for tipping or not, but the government literally already polices what the minimums are, and they're absolute bullcrap. If the minimums weren't absolute bullcrap, then I would imagine this wouldn't be as big of a problem.
That's so weird, bro. Like, it's so fucking weird. Yeah, it's just, I hate that, man. Not tipping? Yeah, I don't tip all the time. Businesses, I can explain this one. Yeah, can I please get one reason why it has to be a fucking a law? Just don't give them the money. Like, I don't get this. Just don't give them the money. Like, what's the problem? Businesses are really taking advantage of employees. Waiters get below minimum wage and filled up by tipping. Let me rephrase that. I think that if you want to tip, that's totally fine.
People won't work
and
for
tipping in some
$2.50.
cases makes sense. Now, I do think there should be legislation that makes.
So okay. If you don't tip, it regulates itself because people won't work for $2.50. Here's the thing. When you have the perspective of that, you're talking about like a fully functioning human adult that has worked in other places and can get another job, or at least knows that they can probably get another job. A lot of people who work in restaurants are like first-time job kids, students, and in recent times, again, we're talking about the US perspective, they've actually lowered the minimum age to work full-time. There's like 14-year-olds working as waiters in the US for $2.50 minimum wage. The reason why this is relevant is because when you're 14, you don't really know any better. You don't have the confidence to realize that you should quit if you're only making that amount. Like, it's scientifically proven that until you're in your early 20s, your brain is literally not fully functional, right? So you're feeding people in the system before their brain works to realize these common sense things, which you're not wrong about, but like there are other factors, is what I'm trying to say.
Makes it to where everybody who is a person who's paid through tips, I don't think that this should be calculated. Like, every single person should have to be paid a minimum wage and a living wage.
Right.
I don't like the idea that this is offset by customers being guilted into it. So I'm not saying that at all. I'm only saying that as an individual, I don't like the idea that if somebody asks for money, that you need the government to tell them no for you. I find this to be massively ridiculous.
So, just for argument's sake, I'm going to argue against his point. So I've lived in Europe for several years, like I was born in Romania and all that. The difference between waiting staff in America and Canada and whatever versus like Europe. In Europe, the typical waiter is like, it's pretty neutral. They're on the clock. Yeah, here you go. Here's some food. You need something? Okay, whatever. And in America, they're like more happy and stuff. It's like, oh, let me solve that for you. Oh, I'll be right back. I'll be just a second. Oh, was that not to your liking? You know, the average waiting service is artificially nice, perhaps, but definitely nicer. Okay. Forced happiness, basically. Yeah, probably for most people. But like the experience of going to a restaurant, interacting with the waiting staff is generally quite a bit worse in Europe, if that's something that you like.
This is super ridiculous. And I'm not saying at all that people should be paid only by tips. Yes, I mean, there are restaurants all over the world, and those waiters are not being paid with tips. That's totally fine. We don't need tips for restaurants to exist, obviously, because the U.S. is not the only place that has restaurants. So I totally feel that way. However, I do find it to be very odd that people have such... I think the reason why is that there's like a massive like social stigma on not tipping. You're seen as like stingy or greedy or shitty or
That's
something like
true.
that, like a bad person for not tipping. And I think people are so afraid of that negative social outcome that they're willing to like do something that's financially bad for them, which I find to be absolutely fucking pathetic. It is absolutely fucking pathetic that somebody is more concerned with what people they don't care about, what they think about them, versus what they're going to do with their own money.
So, yeah, but that's not the only factor. It's not about like feeling like embarrassed or bad or whatever. It's like, bro, in America, they make $2.50 in some states. The only way they can almost survive is if you close the gap. So, I don't know. You kind of feel bad for the person, not the embarrassment of not tipping them.
And that is what I think is problematic, because I don't think in any way the government should try to regulate that. That's pathetic. If somebody wants to ask for 100% tip, tell them fucking no. You are a grown-ass adult. Learn to say no. Again.
Sorry, I was mistaken. Apparently, the federal tipped minimum wage is $2.13. Yeah, you guys just got a 37-cent pay cut. My bad.
I think that tips should 100% not be calculated into somebody's wages. I think it's crazy. Everybody should be paid a minimum wage, a living wage, whatever you want to call it. There should not be anybody getting paid $2 an hour because they can get tips too. I just wanted to make sure that was very clear. Because I know some people, like, there's nuances with that. People might not understand where I'm coming from. Hopefully you guys see what I'm saying now.
Okay, I just want to point out one thing. When I was a kid, like 20 years ago, the minimum wages in the US were the same. Uh, I believe that the campaign contribution caps for politicians in the US is automatically increased by inflation's percentage every year. So politicians, yeah, politicians can keep up with inflation automatically, and those same politicians haven't agreed to increase the minimum wages for as long as I remember.
Only make it easier for customers to gauge just how much they're spending for a service, but it also makes the income of the service worker much more stable. In fact, this is how it's done in most places outside of the United States and Canada.
I also, now that I think about it more, because somebody mentioned something about a restaurant and how they're going to fuck with your food, I do think it could be fair to mandate that a user, like, you can't ask for a tip until after you provide service. Because I do think that it's like super hyper toxic that, like, you know how much you're getting tipped before you give service. And like there's all these memes of like Uber drivers and shit like that putting people's hot food next to the AC if they're not tipping them, right? This is
I haven't
extremely
experienced this
toxic,
personally,
and
but
it's
yeah,
bad for the user. And it just creates a bad environment, and there's no positive to it. So I do think that it could be fair for some sort of legislation to say that you can't ask for a tip before you receive service.
I mean, yeah, obviously there's like some exceptions where like sometimes when we book like airport service, we just like tip the driver before being driven to the airport, something like that. Some exceptions. I don't really care too much about it, but generally, yeah.
Or, you know, until after you provided service, something like that.
Countries like France, Denmark, and much of Europe, a standard service fee of 15% is applied to all bills. So there's no awkward situation where you have to select 15, 25, 35%, or no tip as the cashiers watch you. But even this is not ideal.
Yeah, I just, again, like that awkward situation, it's not awkward to me because it's just not really a big deal. Like, just don't feel awkward. Stop being peer pressured by a capitalist society. Be your own man. It's that simple.
Ideally,
just say no.
The price of the
Just
service
just
is
say
just
no.
included
No,
in
no
the
tipping,
tipping
boys.
itself,
No
as
tipping.
is the case in Japan, China, and South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in many of these countries, tipping is actually considered rude and disrespectful.
Yeah, like you need the money.
The reason being that if you're tipping, you're basically insinuating that the business does not pay them enough, which is unfortunately often the case in America.
That's actually true.
In fact, the minimum wage for service workers is only $2.13 per hour in America.
Insane.
But how did things get so bad? How did tipping go from being something that we used to appreciate exceptional service to being a burden for customers and a necessity for employees?
I think one of the big reasons why it happened.
Okay, this is about where I finished watching the video because I was watching it before the stream. I didn't have much time to finish it. Yeah, it's obviously because those minimum wages haven't been increased like ever. So probably I'm guessing that they're going to come to the conclusion that the recent spike in inflation and the non-increase in wage minimums in the US amount to a higher pressure for tips because people are interested in like shelter and like food, and some of those people work for tipped minimum wages of $2.13.
Happen, like, personally, I think the reason why it happens nowadays is because it's a way for people to express wealth. So like people get to show that they have a lot of money by being able to tip. So then it gives them a way to shame other people for having less money that simultaneously doesn't make them look like assholes. So it gives the upper class and people that are more affluent a way to look down on lower class people. I think that's number one. And number two,
I mean, maybe it's a factor for some people because there's more egotistical dickheads out there than we think there are. But I don't know. I don't think people generally, as a number one, tip to make less wealthy people look bad. That's that's like, yeah, maybe some people, but not that many, I don't think.
Too is because the waiters and everybody I think has a general understanding that waiters need tips in order to make money.
Right,
So it's seen differently because they're not receiving a full wage. Like,
right.
for example, how many of you guys, one of the decisions in your mind, whether you should tip or not, is whether this person is working at a restaurant that is a service restaurant that they're being paid $2 or they're getting paid an actual living wage. Because, like, for me, if I
That's a
know
pretty
somebody
big
is a
factor.
waiter, I would be more likely to tip them than if I know they were just an employee receiving $15 an hour.
So in the US, if a business can pay their waiter staff $2 or $15, they're not going to be paying $15 a whole lot. I'm sure there's cases, but yeah, you don't really have to guess. Is my opinion on that.
You see what I'm saying? You don't tip. Sorry, job doesn't pay me to drive 7 miles for $3 to drop off your $3 at McDonald's. Well, I understand that, and again, you don't have to drive 3 miles to drop off their McDonald's. You have chosen to engage in this.
It's just you, and you can say it's illegal, but you can sure as shit tell you that the tips you received, you sure as hell would report less than you actually earned when it comes to income tax. I mean, are you saying that the tipping system results in less money through the tax system? Again, we're kind of looking at this from the America perspective. You think the problem is that the guy that has a base wage of $2.13 is cheating the tax system of literal pennies? You think that's the problem with the tax system in the US? I mean, I don't know. But the way that I see it is, if I'm tipping someone, or if I'm paying for a service or a tip or literally anything, it's out of my hands at that point. If whoever I'm giving money to wants to commit tax fraud, that is entirely on them, right? Like, I don't care. So, yeah, who cares?
This is not like nobody, kidnapped you and made you be an Uber driver. This is your job. You chose to take this job. And if you are unhappy with the payment from the job, quit the fucking job or take it up with your employer, not the people that you're serving, because your employer should be responsible for paying you. That's why they're your employer. That's between you and them, not the fucking customer.
I don't like, this is kind of based on the economy. Like, if unemployment is really high, this is not as much of a factor, right? Like, if it's hard to find a job. Like, yeah, I worked as a computer technician. You know when I got that job? 2009. You guys think it was easy to get a job with like no experience in 2009? I mean, I ended up being pretty good at it, but like, I certainly wouldn't have the attitude that he's describing. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people, especially disproportionately in like, food industry, they're pretty young kids in some cases. So they wouldn't, even if they knew that to be true, I don't think they would have the confidence to act on it.
The customer's paying the company. They're not paying you. It's going to Uber, not Billy.
Taking a look back, tipping wasn't always a custom in the United States, but it has been this way for quite some time, as American tipping dates back to the mid-1800s. You may have heard that tip stands for to ensure promptness, but
Okay, like mid 1800s means 270 years ago. Okay. Oh, I mean 18. Oh, not 18th century. Okay, so 170 years ago. All right, fine. Um, sure.
That's just a myth. In reality, tipping was something that wealthy Americans discovered when traveling to Europe. You see, tipping was a master-serf custom that was invented in Europe during the Middle Ages. Masters would reward servants with extra cash for excellent service.
There you go.
As these Americans saw this practice,
bonus.
they latched onto it and they brought it back to the US. Being able to pay extra for a service really showcased their status and wealth.
Oh God. This is like, do you guys, was it Aiden Ross? He like tipped a waiter $1,000 and the waiter just like had no reaction and left with it. That is definitely what you should do. If there's some dickheads surrounded by lesser dickheads with like a bunch of cameras shouting and stuff, and then they tip you a lot of money, do not react. Pocket that thing because it is peanuts to them and walk away. All right? Like, here's how I know this is bullcrap. It's on YouTube. That's how I know. Not that he didn't tip the lady, but like it's such a forced thing. Like if you really want to like thank someone and they did a really outstanding service, give them money and don't put it on YouTube. Okay? If you put it on YouTube, you're kind of capitalizing on this like really messed up situation of people working crappy jobs for low money. It's like pretty messed up.
Which many of their egos could not resist.
And that's what it is, bro. Like, there's nothing that disgusts me more than upper middle class people that look down on lower working class people for not being able to tip. Like, I find that to just be the pinnacle of just absolute, like, it's just vile behavior. It's so disgusting.
I don't know a lot of people. I don't know anyone who like
them.
does that.
Tipping didn't catch on.
The
in
ego
America
thing has
that
escaped
easily.
me up
In
until this
fact,
video.
There was a lot of resistance to tipping. For one, people felt that tipping culture was simply reinforcing social constructs and classism. The upper class was literally flexing their wealth on lower class citizens.
Yep.
But that wasn't the only concern.
Yes,
The other
but-
concern was that tipping was only viable for the rich. Eating out was expensive as it is, so expecting middle class and lower class people to offer tips on top of the bill seemed un-American.
Okay. I just want to be really clear. So I don't know why, but eating out in like Europe is generally cheaper. Okay, I'm from the Balkans. Maybe it's a Balkans thing. But like it's a thing in Greece too. Like relative to how much money you make, going out to eat in Canada and in the US is like really expensive. So this whole thing of like it's mostly rich people that go out to eat and stuff, that is actually more true in like Canada, America. That is actually more true. Like, you know, when I was a kid and, you know, like for my birthday, my dad would take me to like an Indian restaurant with my uncle. And that's still the best part of my birthday, by the way. I really enjoyed that. But like that and maybe like one or two other things was like the only time we would go to a restaurant. And that was the case with like, you know, people that I knew. And like it's not like we lived in like a, you know, low income area or anything. That's just kind of the habits of people. The habits of people is they don't go out to eat that often usually, and going out to eat again in Canada, America, it's pretty expensive relative to like Balkans at least.
It is.
This ideology became so prevalent in America that it actually spread to Europe, and that's why tipping is not standard in European countries. But America would completely U-turn on this idea after the Civil War. While slaves were finally freed, their job prospects weren't all that great. And
Yeah, I love how the foundation of tipping is built off of slavery and racism. As if that doesn't give you a pretty good indicator of, is this a good thing or not? Yeah. So like this thing we started doing with like slaves, Oh, okay. I'm sure we're on the right moral fucking track now, right, guys? Holy
Most of
fuck.
them would end up in service-related industries. And these industries figured that this was the perfect opportunity to capitalize on tipping. You see, these industries figured that they could get away with paying former slaves no money.
Yep.
Technically, they weren't enslaving these people as they could earn.
I'm gonna have to overrule all of this. I think, however this started, first of all, I want to point out that something that happened 170 years ago, it's really hard to truly understand the scope of it. It's really hard to really understand the general opinion of a population, how it's ingrained to the culture, how their attitudes were towards something, and it's super easy to misconstrue that in like a different way than was reality. Also, doesn't really matter where it came from. I think the whole tipping thing again is a problem because the tipped minimum wage is $2 in America. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Money through tips. Also, they could theoretically leave at any time, but really, it's not like they had anywhere else to go to. So, service industries became filled with former slaves that became dependent on tips for income.
Yep. Again, a really great moral foundation for tipping. Well, back whenever we had slaves, you see, they made them work for no money. And nowadays, like,
Suddenly,
Jesus.
tipping was no longer a way to flex your wealth. It became
You worked at hotels all your life, 20 years plus, and the average tip for a housekeeper is 0, no matter the class of the client. The only time they get tipped is if a room is a disaster, and even then it's only a couple bucks. So, yeah, we don't really tip like hotel housekeeper, maid service type of stuff. But that's because Canada has used like tap-based credit cards for literally everything for like almost 20 years now. The reason I don't leave like a few bucks for like hotel staff and stuff is because I never have any cash on me ever for like 20 years. You know, if they ask me when I check out at the hotel, I'd probably tip them. I don't know. It's just really inconvenient to tip them. And like, and there's also the disconnect. It's like if you like, would you just leave money out or something? Like you don't know who's getting it. Like some of the housekeeper staff is like several people. I don't know. It's just too big of a disconnect and it's too inconvenient. That's the problem.
became a much more of a moral issue. If you didn't tip, you were inadvertently supporting slavery.
There you go.
Now, of course, you could argue that if you buy chocolate or something, you're supporting child labor in some third world country.
You are.
But it's much
Definitely.
harder to accept that when you're face to face with a person.
Yeah.
Essentially, people who were against slavery started feeling obliged to tip, regardless of their own financial position.
Yeah, you hate
And with
slavery,
that,
right, bro?
Tipping started becoming
Bro, you don't
a
like
burden.
slavery, do you? Bro, were you a slavery enjoyer?
While tipping was rapidly gaining popularity throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s,
I don't know why
this
he
isn't
keeps
to say
going
that
in on that.
everyone was happy with
Really
the
don't
practice.
think that's
In fact,
relevant.
a large portion of the population was not happy with the practice.
Nobody would like tipping. Why would anybody like the idea of having to pay more money for something? Like, of course, nobody would like it. No, nobody likes this, except for people that are making money from tips.
Okay, I'll just quick tangent here. So, in Greece and again, Romania, where I'm from, like, you know, Balkans, I guess. Usually you tip if you're gonna like round the thing. So if you know, if it's gonna be like, if your bill is like 58 euros, the custom is to give like 60. Okay, but also, it's very common that when you go out to eat in the Balkans, that people stay like hours. Like in America, you go out to eat, and then it's like, excuse me, sir, you've been here 90 minutes. Is there anything else I can get you? You finish your food, you get kicked out, basically. I mean, probably sometimes literally even. It never happened to me, but, there's certainly, yeah. In the Balkans, it ain't like that. In the Balkans, dudes are there for like 4, 5, 6 hours just to chat it up. And they might order like a coffee or something every now and then. Also, it's my experience that, again, in the Balkans, if you go to a place like a few times, they give you like free stuff all the time. It's not just like this one place that, no, just like, it's very common. Like if you've been to one place like 4 or 5 times and you've been there a couple hours, there's a high chance you're getting free dessert. High chance. Yeah. So the way that it works in the Balkans, again, I don't know all of Europe, but in the Balkans, yeah, tea, coffee, yeah. The way that it works in the Balkans is it's kind of a little back and forth. Okay. Like it's like the restaurant will tip the customer with like some free stuff from time to time. Balkan sounds like an amazing place. You should move there. Well, let me tell you another thing about tipping. In post-communist Romania, when I was like 3 or 4 years old, my parents were explaining this to me because it's not a common sense thing. Communist fell when I was about 2 years old, just so you guys know. You have to tip doctors and dentists and something like that. Because they literally will do a crappy job on you if you don't. And the thing about Romania, at that time, it was like 50% inflation per month. So when this was happening, it wasn't even polite to tip cash. Okay. Not making this up, because this was a lesson that I was taught when I was a kid. Okay. This wasn't even assumed. They explained this to me and I never forgot it. Okay. When I went to the fucking dentist as like a 3 or 4 year old, I handed a sack of oranges to the dentist. All right. Because oranges in post-communist Romania are pretty fucking hard to come by. Don't you dare tip cash. Your teeth are fucked if you tip cash. All right. So if you think this is bad, oh, it gets worse. But, let's have both sides of the coin. Vegan bribes.
And we would see some resistance even from local governments. Georgia, for example, deemed that tips were essentially commercial bribes used to influence service. So naturally, paying bribes should not be customary or encouraged.
Yeah.
But the issue was that much of the pushback from these governments were classic in their own ways.
When I was sick in Romania, my dad bought a bag of coffee beans to the doctor at an urgent clinic so I could be seen faster. Well, your father is a smart man.
For example, in 1915, 6 states would abolish the practice of tipping. This seems like a reasonable move. The policy that should have been introduced to enforce this rule would have been some sort of minimum wage. This way, service workers would no longer be dependent on tips. But instead of punishing businesses for paying $0 incomes, these governments would decide to punish service workers. Iowa, for example, ruled that those who accepted a gratuity of any kind, not those who gave the money themselves, could be fined or imprisoned.
What?
Bro, what is going on in the government, man? What? How do they do that? What the hell? What is wrong with them?
Fortunately, Supreme Courts would step in and deem these rules unconstitutional.
Thank you.
But they never proposed.
Let's not forget that in Romania, the usual tip is 10%. Nah, the usual tip's 10% in like Bucharest or something. Uh, Romania is not as like city focused as like Canada. Like in Canada, you have like the few big cities and then like no one lives anywhere else. Romania is not like that. But yes, in some of the big cities it's like that, but outside the big cities it's not. And again, I haven't been there in like a couple of years, but you know, that's what I remember.
Proposed a better solution, meaning that things just returned to how they were. In fact, they actually became worse due to a series of laws passed by Congress, starting with the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938. This legislation introduced a federal minimum wage, a 40-hour work week, and banned child labor, which sounds great. But
Banned
the
child
pitfall
labor.
of this act was that it specifically excluded tipped workers. Congress would simply double down on the stance in 1966 with their so-called tip credit. Essentially, restaurants were legally allowed to pay a sub-minimum wage as long as
Bro, like, how does anybody watch this and not think that it's rigged?
Obviously.
Like, it's crazy. Like, how do you not think it's rigged? It's what the fuck?
tips pushed workers over the minimum wage threshold. At least restaurants were required to pay a percentage of the minimum wage, usually somewhere between 40 and 60%. But this too would change with time. In 1996, Congress ruled that restaurants only had to pay tipped workers.
Yeah, remember when I said for as long as I remember, this was always the minimum wage in the US? Yeah. When I was a kid, I came to Canada in 1994, at the end of 1994. Minimum wage, I believe, was about 6 Canadian dollars. Minimum wage isn't great still, but let me tell you what it is. $16.55 right now. So as a percentage, that is a little more than 2.5 times higher. Right? In the US, this has not changed in that time. Like, again, like, it's a US perspective, that's why I keep bringing it up. But yeah, I think it's very core to the problem.
A minimum of $2.13 per hour, and that's still how it is across much of the US. You would think that with all these anti-service worker policies that people would rise up and protest these changes, but the exact opposite actually happened.
No, of course not, because it gives people, the thing is, everybody always wants a way to look down on other people. And if you give people that tool, they will enjoy it a lot. That's the reason why people buy expensive cars, they buy expensive clothes, they buy expensive everything. It's because everybody wants to be conspicuous with spending their money.
I'm actually a bit surprised of this Asmongold take. I don't think the ego component plays that big of a role. Now, if we're talking gold-plated Ferraris, yes. But if we're talking about like a luxury like shirt or something, not like okay, I like a specific brand of shirts, and the first one I bought, I was like, I can't believe I'm paying this much money for a shirt. And you know, all in all, it wasn't that expensive. It was like $120 for like a shirt. Okay, they're the John Lennon brand, and some of the others are the British Laundry or something like that. Anyway, they're like some British brands, but like the materials are really good. The first shirt I bought from that was like 7 years ago. It still looks brand new. The first one is still in my closet. All right, it's made of good materials. They look nice. It's high quality, and yeah, if everything fits well, it feels good. Right? There is definitely a non-ego component to buying luxury goods. I'll give you guys another example. So when Rania and I got our own place, I remember talking about this and people were like losing their mind. So this was like 8 years ago, so it'd be more now. For like 2 desks, a bed, 2 dressers, a table, and 6 chairs, and a bench. We paid $14,000. It wasn't from like a luxury place, but it was a pretty high-end place. I think it was called Urban Barn or something like that. All of it is solid wood, stained, and has cast iron like handles and stuff. Yeah, we bought that 8 years ago, and all of that furniture looks exactly the same, and we've moved since. Right? We didn't buy the furniture to like ego drop on lesser mortals who might decide to visit our dwelling. Okay. We just got it because it looked really good. It was very solid. And yeah, it's probably going to last, and did. Right? Yeah. Anyway, I just say the ego component is striking to me how much he's focusing on it.
So,
because again, we buy like pretty pricey stuff all the time. It's just we don't do that to like I don't personally do that to ego drop. I don't care.
it gives them a way to look down on poor people that's socially accepted. And there is no better thing in the world to be able to shit on somebody and think that you're morally justified or you're ethically justified for doing it. Like, that is the pinnacle, bro. It's like jerking off, where like you can shit on somebody and treat somebody like fucking garbage, and it's okay because you're morally superior. That's what they love.
The demographic.
I don't know a whole lot of people who behave like that, thankfully. I guess Asmongold is more familiar, which probably makes sense. He's probably in like the bigger streamer circles and stuff. I'm not saying what he's saying is wrong. I said it's striking. It's striking because the reason he would have this opinion is probably most of the people he interacts with do this. Most people I interact with don't do this.
Graphics of service industries were rapidly changing. It was no longer a bunch of former slaves. In fact, over 50% of all waiters are now white people. But it wasn't just the public that was okay with the tipping either. Many service workers actually preferred the tipping model. You see, it wasn't just the race of service workers that was changing, it was also the age.
Well, you're going to, of course, have more service workers that prefer the tipping model because it's a survivorship bias. All of the people who don't prefer the tipping model aren't servers. So if you poll servers, all of them would probably be more likely to like it, or they wouldn't be servers. It's just, there it is.
Nowadays, service industries are...
Maybe I'm out of touch, but like, can you really work wherever you want if your job prospects are a server in a restaurant? Like, I feel even though you might be right to, if you like quit on like 3 different restaurants because you were unfairly treated or whatever, and then you apply to the 4th restaurant, they're probably going to have some questions, right? They're probably going to call your old boss, and your old boss is not going to have something good to say about you. Like, I don't know. I feel that's how it works. I feel like the worker generally doesn't have that much power in this whole thing. But I don't live like that's something that I wouldn't know as a Canadian. When are mods getting erased? Let's continue the video. We're running out of time here.
are filled with a bunch of high school students and young adults. In fact, nearly 50% of all waiters are between the age of 20 and 30. For these people, doing service work is often a part-time thing, so stability isn't necessarily the top concern.
Well, it's also that if you're younger, the odds are that you're more attractive. And if you're more attractive, the odds are you're going to get more tips. So it would make sense that more young people are into being servers, because that, you follow the logic. That will, on average, give them more tips. There it is.
I wonder if they're going to get into it. I believe I have seen, like, I don't know if it was like an article or a Reddit post, but would you believe I believe the average female waiter made more than the average male waiter. Yep. But again, it's the system that's kind of busted with the crazy low wages, right?
It is. Makes sense. Yes, it just makes sense. Bigger tits, bigger tips. Definitely.
I guess they did address it.
That they're much more willing to take a gamble. Instead of taking a set minimum wage, they're willing to bet on the generosity of people during a Friday night or Independence Day weekend. Statistically speaking, you're much better off with a minimum wage, but this hasn't exactly changed the minds of service workers. Tipping was no longer about appreciation or fighting slavery. Tipping was now about maximizing revenue for service industries and service workers, leading us to where we are today. It turns out that there's a whole science behind the psychology of tipping, and there's dozens of research articles about how to maximize tips. These studies...
Oh, it's
Obviously.
easy. If you want to know, listen, I could do a 3-hour video about how to farm donations on Twitch. I am so good at this. Bro, me and McConnell had this down. Bro, this shit was a science.
Yeah, can you guys just give me more donations so I don't have to watch this thing? Alright? Making me feel bad here. It's starting to flex on my impoverished state when it comes to donations. Jesus Christ, dude.
It was a fucking, you go from, you got a bullet point list with, numbers, letters, lowercase letters. Bro, everything was in there. You had, okay, how to respond in certain ways. Oh, man. It was no problem on how to do this. If you think that it's all just some random mumbo-jumbo shit, there are tried and true ways to farm donations. Oh, it's not even the Twitch Prime thing. To be honest, the Twitch Prime was whenever we started getting lazy. Yeah, we started getting lazy at that point. It's Twitch Prime, yeah, whatever, right? But you got...
Dude, when Twitch Prime hit, that's when I stopped being lazy. We never really solicited donations much because even subs, we didn't really solicit subs. Because, it's people's money. I don't want to pressure others into giving me their money. We're doing okay, guys. If you want to support the stream, if you've been watching, forever and ever, and you want to, thank you. But, I don't want to I don't want anyone to feel bad. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to. I don't want that. I think, personally speaking, I don't like that. But when Jeff Bezos is flipping the bill, you know what? Let's go. Twitch Prime it up, boys. Okay, let's go. All right. I know you guys have the Amazon Prime already. Okay, I'm taking his money. Okay, Bezos bucks. That's different. Give me those things. So it's kind of funny how Asmongold got lazy when they introduced Twitch Prime, but no, dude, that's go time for me.
Gotta go deeper than that.
Found that waiters should introduce themselves, repeat customer orders, give compliments, call customers by their name, etc. But those are all small fish items. The factor that has really propagated modern tipping culture is none other than technology. the reality
Well, I
is,
think also a lot of people tipped during the pandemic because they're like, well, if you're willing to
Hugger, no,
die
thank you
for
for the
my
tip earlier.
sandwich, I can at least give you $1, right? I
Thank
think
you.
that's kind of reasonable.
Oh, we got a hype train.
You know, like sure. So I think that's why people were willing to tip back in the day.
is that technology makes it so easy to spend money and has removed so much of the pain that is naturally associated with spending money
Thank you. I'm out the
that
F5
we're
gives
simply
subs.
way
Thank
more
you.
willing to spend money. Take cards, for example. Consumers are willing to spend up to 83% more when paying with a card as opposed
Bro, thank you, bro. Because I have been saying this shit for years. I am so glad now I have a number. Yep, there you go. I told you this. If you want to save money, go to the fucking ATM, go to the bank, take the money out of your fucking card account, and then pay for shit with cash.
I think if someone sees a statistic, you actually just become less prone to it. The whole thing of carrying cash and coins and stuff is so annoying. Again, this is not true for the US. In Canada, like with a credit card and stuff, I know in the US they have credit cards, but in the US, you have to like use the chip and input your code, or when you go to a restaurant, they take your card, then like bring it back, and you have to trust the waiters that they're not taking like a photo or something, and they scamming you. You know, like it's like pretty weird. In Canada, everything is tap. It's been tapped for like 20 years. You get a card, you just get it near the machine, and you're done. Okay? I haven't really used cash for like 20 years. Right? And like, yeah, maybe this is true, but like if you know that this is true, I think you can start to be more conscious about it. I don't know. I haven't had any spending problems. Okay, like I know, rich guys. Okay, my family immigrated to Canada. Yeah, they had good educations and stuff, but yeah, no. Okay. It could have been much worse. Sure. I think overall on the world stage, I've been very lucky, but it's not like because God, I feel bad talking about it now because there's like people fucking starving out there, right? So sure, but from my perspective, knowing how much money you have to spend and being disciplined to spend it or not is really where it starts and ends, right?
And I don't know about you guys. I'm sure there are people that are part of that 73% or 17%, maybe that are different. That's not really how the math works with that, but let's just say it does. I'm sure there are people that spend more cash than whenever they're on the card, right? Different psychology. But I think with a lot of people, like seeing the fucking money, you see the money, and it's like, okay, this is why I bought these.
What is that? Are those like dummy bills?
I bought these because it's like whenever we're talking about playing Lost Ark, how does it feel every time that I do a 10 pull in Honkai Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and I tear one of these fuckers in half? It's a whole different vibe than whenever you just see some crystals disappear. Because you know what this is. This is a fucking 20. This is a me.
So when it comes to video game microtransactions, it's much worse than cash versus card. Cash versus card is like some kindergarten crap. Yes, some games are like super predatory and they try to disguise like just play Diablo Immortal. Don't put in your credit card information. Just look at the pop-ups that come out and weigh in your desire to click on one of them. Okay, that's what I'm talking. Don't give me more money, please. Don't pay them more money for Diablo Immortal because they're gonna make Diablo Immortal 2 and 3. And then they're not even going to have devs left for the other franchises. Okay, do not give them any more money. Please don't do that. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Wyatt. Okay, no. So it is in a similar train of thought. But like, They're not the same.
Meal anywhere, and this shit just went in the goddamn garbage. So yeah, it's an investment though. Oh yeah, true. Let's see here. It's not legal to destroy currency. It depends on what the currency is. So for example, if it's currency, it would be illegal, but if it's not currency, it's not illegal. Yeah. So does that make sense?
I'm guessing those things that he's tearing up are not real $20 bills, like I imagine.
Anyway, point is that if you're trying to save money, buy things with cash. Every single time that I am somewhere and I'm buying something with cash, I am always less likely to spend money because I can see the value of the money going away.
Okay, just to kind of close thoughts on this. I don't think this is necessarily a bad idea. It's maybe one thing, and I think it'll probably work for some people. Like I know some people they only use like prepaid credit cards type of thing. Some people use only like debit or something. You know, it's like different systems work for different people.
To cash. So I don't think you'd be surprised to hear that the average cash purchase is only $22, while the average card purchase is $112.
That is a completely fucking meaningless statistic. Because when I'm buying $14,000 worth of furniture that I'm only buying once, I ain't bringing a briefcase with 2 security guards to do it. Okay. But yeah, when I'm buying a damn popsicle, if I have cash, they're getting it.
Only $22, while the average card purchase is $112.
Oh, that's probably an average, right? It's like you're averaging like bill payments and stuff like that. I find that to be like, I don't really like that statistic. I find that to be a misleading and like not very great statistic. Because
meaningless.
A lot of people have like automatic payments on cards, whereas whenever they're buying things with cash, they're paying for smaller ticket items, like for example, like buying something at a convenience store, etc. So you have like there's a reason why card purchases would be higher. Yeah, it's a bad data point.
$12. But by far the biggest culprit when it comes to excessive tipping is the infamous iPad payment terminals. For starters, you're
we
paying
have
with
these
a
all over
card
the place
as
in
opposed to
Austin.
cash, so that's already working against you. But there are several other factors that push you to tip. For example, you don't have to go through the
Wait, okay. You know, I take any opportunity to hate on overpriced technology products, but like, what's wrong with Apple tablets? Did I miss something? What? The kiosk?
hassle of calculating a tip. You can simply select a percentage and the iPad will do the math. Another technique that these terminals employ is suggesting a super high minimum tip. This terminal, for example, is suggesting a minimum tip of 18%. Of course, you could skip the tip, but what if you felt that the service actually deserved a 5 or 10% tip? You can either type in the tip manually, which would just prolong the...
I think 18% is pretty much the standard tip in Canada, Toronto area. Just saying it.
Awkwardness, or you can just select 18. Speaking of awkwardness, this is likely the most effective method when it comes to guilting customers into tipping. And
I think also the problem is the implication, like everybody's seen Waiting, right? So it's the implication that if you don't tip, you're going to get bad service. I do think that it is unhealthy that people are expected to tip before they receive service.
Do you tip your delivery guy 18%? We don't use delivery guys anymore. We just don't want another person like handling our food. It's pretty simple. That's it. It's not. We never even had bad experience with one. we don't live like in a crazy dense metropolis or whatever. Like we don't get stuck in traffic if we want to go pick up food. So we don't have that problem, and we don't want someone else handling our food. Post-COVID, pre-COVID, we use them more.
This is just, it's very, very bad. And I do think that there is no reason that it should be like that, and it is harmful to the customer.
The source of most people's frustrations. Traditionally, any and all tips are left on the table, and waiters don't see the amount until after the customer leaves. This allows customers to be honest about how good the service actually was. But when you're forced to select a tip amount at the register,
Again, as someone who never has any cash, the only time I have cash, I have like a $50 bill. Okay. So how is that fair? Like, do people in the United States have like a coin purse with like every nomination like times 10, and they actually tip in the exact change what they felt the service was worth? Like, is at Sonic? Dude, Sonic, the strawberry like slushy is so good. Oh my god, I missed that. I gotta get me one of those.
you know that the cashier is going to see what you select, but that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that everyone behind you is also going to see what you select, and you...
This is just, bro, like, I am so sick. I'm sorry. I am so sick of these pussies, bro. Absolute fucking pussies. It's your goddamn fucking money. Who gives a fuck what some moron behind you thinks? This guy gives a fuck. He's an NPC. Who cares?
So, I completely agree with Asmongold in this case, but that's because I believe we are both part of the, unfortunately, highly exclusive Have No Shame Club. Sorry guys, membership's closed. But I believe most people are not part of this club. So it just doesn't work that way in their minds. Most of us in the US are taught never to leave home without cash because you might need it if something bad happens. Just use a credit card. What do you mean?
Why do you? What the fuck's wrong with you? What does this even matter? Pathetic.
You don't want to be that one person
Elite
that
member of the
skips
club.
the tip. Service industries have figured out how to brilliantly leverage technology and peer pressure you into maximizing tips.
Yeah.
While this is a smart move for them, this has simply left customers exhausted and frustrated with modern tipping.
Again, I think a big part of it is some of the striking examples. Like 5 years ago, it was pretty rare that a terminal, like a terminal in a restaurant, would have like a tip for a pickup order. It's not it didn't happen. It sometimes it did, but it was pretty rare. And like nowadays, every single time you buy food, even if you just pick it up, it always has like the tipping prompt. Always. Yeah, 5 years ago, boomer. Right, so that is a change. You never tip for pickup order? Right. That's debatable. I certainly don't feel guilty if I'm just picking up a food order. If I go to like a place where I know them, like, okay, my favorite burrito place near me, I pick up the order every single time, even though they have free delivery, every single time. And I tip them 20%, which is the maximum amount I can tip as like an auto option when I order online. Okay. And I do that because they're really nice. They always have my food on time, and it's always good. And like, I don't know, they'd appreciate it, and I can afford it. It's not a big deal every time. All right. But like, if I go to a new place, pick up some food, I don't know what it is. I don't know them. You know, I don't feel compelled to tip on like a pickup order. Now, the other side of that is I've had a tip prompt ordering from a machine at McDonald's. I mean, come on, right? Like, at least tell me who's getting the tip. Okay. Like, does it go to Chat GPT? Who gets it? Right? I don't even know. Yeah. So it's definitely out of control in some cases. Definitely.
The
Hearing all this,
anti-tipping
I
movement.
don't think that you'd be surprised to hear that there's a strong and a growing movement against tipping. These people argue that tipping has nothing to do with showing appreciation and everything to do with the fact that many service workers aren't paid fairly to begin with. I mean, it's
Yeah, I
not
think that's
like
the way a
you
lot
tip
of people
service
see it.
workers who are paid well. For example, when was the last time you tipped your pilot or your lawyer or your accountant or your doctor? These people provide way more.
This guy is not familiar with accountants. Here's what accountants do. They tip themselves. Okay. When's the last time you tip your accountant? Get the fuck out of here, dude.
valuable services
Yeah,
than a
it's guilt tripping, definitely. Guilt tipping. There you go.
waiter or a hotel housekeeper, yet you don't tip them. If anything, you might send them a thank you note or buy them chocolate. Why? Well, probably because you know that they're already paid well, which supports the idea that the only reason you tip
Yeah, I think that's, again, it's a big reason why people tip is that they know these servers don't make any fucking money.
Yeah.
If
Again,
everybody
it's
knew that they were
taken like
making
30
a good
minutes, but
wage, I think that
that's
tipping
my
would
main
go down
argument.
tremendously. And like the social pressure of it would completely, like it would go down like 80%. It would get massively nerfed.
some service workers is because you know they're paid poorly, not actually because you appreciate their service. So, theoretically, if we paid service workers better wages, we can
Okay. I want to just interject here. I think they're breaking it down a little bit too much. Okay. Like, when I get food and choose to tip, it's because they do a pretty good job, and I know an extra like $10 or $20 or whatever can be meaningful. Because, yeah, they don't make that much money. Okay, it's a package deal. You don't need to break those things apart and discredit each one with different arguments.
eliminate tipping culture in America. Pro tippers don't agree. They feel that eliminating tipping will simply give businesses more opportunity to gouge prices. For example, a $21 meal may rise to $24. Also,
I really hate the logic, and people use this logic with other things too, like employing like migrant workers and stuff like that. I really hate the logic that the reason why we should keep people in unhealthy, bad jobs that are paying them badly is because if we don't, things will cost more.
I'm a server and we have to tip the kitchen 6% of our tips. So a lot of the time, if we get 0% on a bill, we still have to pay 6% out of our own pockets. You mean 6% of the food cost? Damn, bro, that's pretty rough. Yeah, that sounds not okay. You should probably look at getting another job if that is on the regular.
This is you're basically saying we have to pay these people slave wages, or if we don't, then the business will things will cost too much. If you can't make a good product by paying a living wage, maybe you don't deserve to be in business. I don't know. Maybe I'm just,
Okay, I'm just gonna summarize this. Pretty. I could talk about this for a few hours, but I'm not going to here. So again, we're talking about this from like the perspective of America. Um, America's like richest country in the history of the world. A big component of this video is that servers have a $2 minimum wage. Okay. It's just like, bro. Yeah, the whole like paying people more and all that, it's generally a mess because the people at the very, very, very top of any company in the US makes ridiculous money, pays very little taxes, in some cases no taxes, in some cases negative taxes, where the small amount of taxes they pay is offset by government subsidies. Negative taxes. You can look it up if you don't believe me. Negative taxes. Okay? Richest people on the planet. And then the people who make $2 an hour baseline, they don't have all the government services that, honestly, a lot of other countries do have. Like social systems, like healthcare, which puts a lot more pressure on that $2. Okay, that is like really the core issue here.
This isn't all that favorable for takeout customers, as they will also have to pay the higher prices. But with that being said, it looks like the rest of the world has made this work. So maybe there's something.
Yeah, it's like it's impossible. Like, bro, how can anybody do this? Like, we're the only place in the world that has restaurants.
Do it, but
The only
only
place.
time will tell. Are you team anti-tip or team pro-tip? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you think tipping has gone way too far. And of course, consider checking out our Discord community, suggest future video ideas, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
There it is. I think this is actually a really good video. I like it.
I've seen
Yeah,
one or two
definitely.
of these.
Customers shouldn't subsidize employees' wages
I've seen
through
a few of
tips.
these.
I
All right.
completely agree with you. I think tipping as a practice is completely toxic. However, I do think people should exercise their own personal self-control in.
I'm sorry to cut off Asmongold here, but I thought the video was pretty good. I think some of the points were broken down too much because not all things need to be broken down to their simplest parts. A lot of the time, the different factors work off one another or together to cause an action or, behavior in people. But I thought the video was pretty interesting and presented some points that I liked. So yeah, that's fine. And I have to agree with everything to like some content.
Deciding whether they want to tip or not. There is no reason why you have to tip. You should never have to tip. You can tip if you want to. Never, ever, 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 ever feel compelled to tip, guys. Listen, if they don't ask you for the money up front, if it's not part of the initial cost whenever you agreed to it, then you should not be expected to pay anything else besides that. And listen, people say, oh, well, if you can't tip, you can't afford to eat out. Okay. Well, if you can't afford to not get tips, maybe you shouldn't be able to have the job. How about that? That's what I think. Don't put it on the menu. Don't charge that price if you don't.
He's basically saying that if you're unhappy with a $2 minimum wage, just quit. But really, the problem is that the minimum wage is $2. That's the problem. So that, yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with that one.
Don't want people to pay it. Too fucking bad.
Basically, what I'm saying is, you quitting your job as a waiter doesn't have as much of an influence as the government screwing you over.
In theory, have tipping allow people with less money to go out more often, but just shame people for doing that. Yeah. Let's see here. As a foreigner, I don't tip in the U.S. because a $5 tip is the price of a full meal in my country. Oh, I don't know. I mean, here's, like, I will tip people money nowadays because, like, Like, I mean, I can, it's not a big deal for me, right? I don't care. And like, I get my money primarily through tips, or I used to at least. Now I can get it through like sponsorships and, you know, ads and stuff like that. But, you know, whenever I was a streamer, it was much easier to just like get money through tips. Exactly. Tipping culture isn't really a thing in the UK. Oh yeah, definitely. I know it's not. You have to pay for every refill outside the US, and for ketchup packets at McDonald's, they also pay to use the bathrooms. Well,
Can you believe that in different parts of the world where they have different government laws around tipping, that the behavior of tipping is different? That's crazy, huh?
I don't know how they do it over there, but McDonald's doesn't get tips here, so I don't really see the comparison. What happens if you don't tip? You'll be worried if you go back to the place? Well, if I get bad service whenever I go back to the place, then I stop going there. It's that simple. Fuck. What do you... Well, like, I mean, yeah, if I go somewhere and I get bad food, I just... Yeah, tipping's on the rise in Europe and other westernized Asian countries, so I don't know about over there, but I know about over here. I used to never tip, and any time that they made me tip, I would steal silverware and different things from the restaurant to make up the money from having to tip. I would do this all the time.
Guys, don't do this. Please don't do this. There's different customs and social pressures and all that, but look, in America, with server minimum wage being $2, if your service was pretty good or better, you know you should be tipping at least something, okay? Don't steal the goddamn forks, okay?
And obviously, like, after a while, I stopped doing that whenever I got a bit older. But, you know, that was my outlook on it all the time. Yeah, tipping must be a spontaneous act, not mandatory. You can fight the tipping culture war, but unfortunately you're just hurting those working in service positions. I don't agree with that. I don't like the idea that you as the...
It's not a culture war. If some politician's like, let's raise the minimum wage, and he's otherwise not a blundering idiot, just go vote for him, okay? Probably that is the best thing you could do about this problem.
Customer exercising your own discretion with your own money, you are hurting somebody. You know who's hurting the people in the service industry? The government and the employers. They're the ones that are hurting them.
Yeah.
You're not hurting them. That's not your problem. That's not your responsibility. You fight by voting and protesting unions. You should do both, right? I mean, this is my thing is that it's the same thing with streaming.
Protesting
like,
unions?
there are people that have watched my content for 10 years. I mean,
what do unions have to do with tipping culture? And why would you protest them? Like against unions? Aren't unions like pretty fundamental when workplace standards and safety falls through the cracks, which it certainly does in this case? Oh, protesting and unions. Okay, I see.
Man, it's about 10 years. It hasn't been 10 years, but it's been a long time, right? Better part of 10 years. And they've watched it with ad block on the entire time. They've never subbed, never donated, neighbor's Wi-Fi, stolen internet, stolen laptop, and they've never spent a single cent. And you know what? I still made money off of you. Because the odds are you probably saw some advertisement that I had.
Not if they use a North Korea VPN.
Was able to utilize your viewership and negotiating a sponsor. I still made money off of you. So really, this is a problem with these restaurants not being able to create a sustainable business model. And if you can't make a sustainable business model and pay people a livable wage or minimum wage, whichever one, I don't really care which one it is. That's a debate for in itself. If you can't pay people what is legally required for everybody else to get paid, you don't deserve to be in business.
This is why the government minimums are so important. Because, like, just most businesses are going to use them. So if you're like, I'm not working for these guys, Dude, if the minimum is $2, some other restaurant's gonna be like, yeah, our minimum is $3. You work for them as if that's gonna be that much better, as if you're not going to rely on tips not to starve. Like, $2 minimum wage for it's insanity. It's insanity. I don't know how else to say it. Okay, let me put it in a different way. Let me put it in a different way. Okay, so $2 minimum wage is from 1996. Has not been increased. Okay? All right. Just about all countries have a minimum wage, right? Why do they do that? So workers aren't completely taken advantage of. That's why they have a minimum wage, right? At a baseline. Obviously, there's more to it, but at a baseline. Is a $2 minimum wage in the US of A even anything? Is that anything? Is that really a minimum? Why not 5 cents, right? That's what I'm trying to say. The numbers are so ridiculous that I would argue that a $2 minimum wage is not even that. Which is like really the core of it. Why not 5 cents? Thanks for the idea. Oh, you're welcome.
That's what I think. You deserve to be in business. It's too bad. Places like McDonald's can pay minimum wage, so why not other restaurants? Because they can rely on...
They get paid the actual minimum wage if they don't make enough tips. So they went over that in this one, and they said that depending on the state, some states only have to make up 40 to 60% of that difference. So maybe in some states they have to make up all of the difference, but apparently in some states they don't.
Like fucking these like middle class people that think...
According to this video, anyway. I don't study employment law in every U.S. state.
Think they're rich, guilt tripping lower class people to give their money away in tips. That's why. I'll link you guys the video again. Easy to say, but how would you want to change it?
Oh yes, I have to link you guys the video.
Here's how I would change tipping, okay? That, like, if I was God,
change it.
This is what I would do.
What would you do, Asmongold?
If I was the government, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I would make it to where you can't ask for a tip until after service has been provided, and I would also...
Yeah, okay.
So,
again, some things it's just more convenient. Like if you book like a car, like an airport car or something like that. If you book like a car, tipping the driver is customary, just tipping them ahead of time. Again, for something like that, if they do a bad job, you really don't use them again. They have an incentive to do a good job.
I think actually, I would make it to where every single person has to be paid the same minimum wage. I would get rid of the idea that some people have to be paid subsidized through tips.
Right.
Like those two things I would do. Everything else I wouldn't.
The minimum wage is also like $7, by the way. So probably should look at that also.
I would still allow people to ask for tips. I would still allow people to try to guilt customers into tipping, because I think that is it is an unhealthy relationship, but I think that the business has a right to ask. I think it's fair. However, I do think that like the customer can they can express their own will without fear of retaliation, as long as they have already received the service. You already tip after service in restaurants, though? Well, we're talking about things like, so whenever I was talking about that, I'm not talking about restaurants. I'm talking about things like Uber and things like Uber Eats, like DoorDash. And there are many places where you actually have to tip before you receive service. Why would someone ask for tips? You give a tip if you want to? Well, because it's money.
Okay, maybe it's my limited experience. I mostly use Uber when I'm traveling in like the US. But the typical Uber driver is pretty nice. Like, bro, if you just take a taxi, like a regular taxi, they're usually a lot less nice. Not always, but usually. I've had great taxis. I actually think that the tipping system in Uber, I can't say if it's good overall because effectively you pay for it, but its purpose has a result, right? It's not pointless.
Japan doesn't enable tipping culture. Well, good for them. People think people being served minimum wage with how people behave. Nobody's going to willingly be a doormat for people for $7 even. Yeah, they will. Look at McDonald's. Of course they will, because they need $7. Like, that's just the truth. Like, somebody says, oh, well, you know, I won't do this for this much money. Okay, so then you're just going to die? No, you're going to do it for $7. Well, I mean, fuck. What else is there to say? Rent isn't free. Yeah, like, it's a sad world, but there it is. What happens in a restaurant?
For Asmongold, I believe he lives in Texas. I think rural Texas, if you make $7 minimum wage, you might actually be able to pay some rents. But I believe that's not true for like nearly every other place in the US. Just put in he's not wrong about that, but that is very much a Texas thing.
Restaurant if you don't tip? I don't know.
I went to Amaz's Archon event. I went to the Archon house. The rent that he paid for like a 6-bedroom with a fucking pool was about as much as you'd pay for like a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto. Seriously.
I get my food, I eat, and then I leave. Who cares what happens to the restaurant? That's not my problem. Yeah, like, who cares?
Okay. That was pretty good. Texas's ass. Different places have different things that are nice about them. I will tell you that I have eaten at Denny's in at least like a handful of states in the US. And I will tell you, hands down, the average Denny's in Texas is the best Denny's in the land. I don't know what they do, but they're like, what is this, super fries or whatever? They probably like triple fry them. They fry them an extra time for fun or something. I don't know, bro. It's different in Texas. Massive W. Yeah. React to another one? Nah, it's past 3. I gotta go. I gotta take out the doggos. I gotta get to sleep. I gotta take care of other things. I mean, I kind of gave my closing thoughts before Asmongold gave his, so I don't really need the last word on this one. But it is a pretty messed up thing, and I don't know. I hope that the people that are most affected by this are able to exercise their right to vote, because that's really how it has to change, I think, in the US. Like, it's so crazy that minimum wage and servers' minimum wage is what it is. But your vote still counts. So, yeah. I think it is something that might drive, like, at least eventual future elections. Like, if the problem is so dire, and it might already be nationwide, that running on like minimum wage reform, cost of living reform type of stuff, I think it could be pretty effective.